And the first item is item 13, the Public Bodies Joint Working Act, the annual performance reports, one from North Highland, one from Argyll and Bute. First one from Highland Health and Social Care Partnership, and Louise is going to speak to that. Is Louise back with us? Is Fiona with us then?
Yes, I'm here and I'm ready if you want.
Yeah, maybe if you go first, Fiona, if you don't mind.
Not at all, Chair. That's no problem at all. Thank you. Welcome back, everybody. And for those of you that are regulars to this annual slot for the delivery of our annual performance report from Argyll and Bute Health and Social Care Partnership, you'll recognise that this seat would normally be taken by my colleague Stephen Whiston, our head of performance in Argyll and Bute. And he's done so every year since the formation of the Integrated Joint Board. Unfortunately, Stephen was not able to join us today, which is particularly unfortunate because this is the last year that he'll be here to present the annual performance report as he works his way towards his well-earned retirement in 2023. So he will be here to give another couple of quarterly updates. He's not disappearing just straight away. But I felt it was a good opportunity for us to join together to thank Stephen for his more than 2 decades of work, both in NHS Highland and in NHS Argyll and Clyde, for all the work that he's done in establishing and embedding performance and its benefits in outcomes for people in our part of the world. So I hope I'm not too bold to drag you all into that thanks. I'm certainly very grateful. I'm sure that others on the board are too.
Happy to be associated with these comments, Fiona.
Thank you, Boyd, as I'm sure are others. Thank you very much, and I'll pass that back to Stephen. So moving on to the report itself now. The reporting of this year's annual performance report has been postponed due to the COVID rules that were brought in. So this report was presented to the Integrated Joint Board on the 23rd of November 2022 and is therefore being brought for your noting today. The focus of this year's report is on the HSCP response to the pandemic, our continuing work on the remobilisation of services and on the vaccine programme. And I'm sure that those of you that have taken the opportunity to look at the report ahead of the meeting will see that there is a whole range of highlight areas that we've drawn out right across the integrated health and social care delivery in Argyll and Bute. Far too many for me to mention in this slot. So I thought I would just draw out a few for your attention today. So within our hospital care, we were able to report that our 12-week waiting times had recovered to pre-pandemic levels, and that our NHS Near Me video consultation had achieved almost 7,000 consultations using that method, or 3,800 hours of contact in our area. Another real highlight in our hospital delivery was the opening of the dialysis unit, the Marshall unit in Bute Hospital. This is now operational 6 days a week, and it's meant that those people experiencing the need for dialysis on the island of Bute, who were previously having to travel over to Inverclyde, are now able to receive that treatment in their own area. And I can tell you that when we had the official opening in October of this year, there wasn't a dry eye in the house, as we heard stories of the difference that that's made to the lives of those people experiencing the need for dialysis and their families. An absolutely enormous achievement for us in Argyll and Bute. Also within that section is a reflection of our vaccination success. in the previous year, and once we'd got our Loch Goyle heads from our Loch Gilp heads sorted out, causing us some initial hiccups initially, we made great strides in our autumn and winter delivery of the vaccination programme last year. And again, that was a real highlight for us in Argyll and for our population and communities. I also just thought I'd draw out some headlines from our children's services section, where we saw last year excellent outcomes for young people leaving care in regard of their housing. And we also demonstrated that we'd fully embedded all elements of the universal health visitor pathway, and in line with the Best Start initiative, a continuity of midwifery care for women in Argyll and Bute. We also had highlights around our child poverty approach, but I thought I'd save that one because I've got another slot in just a couple of minutes on that one. So I'll save those headlines for the next report. In relation to primary care, we've established pharmacotherapy teams that are in place to provide medicine management to most GP practices across our localities. And our primary mental health service is now operational, that some practices have access to, and we're averaging in the last year 90 patients a month accessing that service. We also have awarded a 3-year contract regarding the Community Link Worker programme, which is an essential element of our person-centred social prescribing approach. And we've awarded that to our third sector partner, We Are With You. In relation to our broader performance, which you'll see notated later in the report, when we're benchmarking ourselves across Scotland, our health and wellbeing outcomes are above the national average in Scotland, which I think, given the context of the COVID pandemic, is a credit to all of our teams. I also just wanted to flag up the final section of the report in relation to finance for 21-22. The IJB set itself a balanced budget for 21-22, and we were able to report a small underspend against the resources available. This allowed the HSCP to pay off its debts early than it had intended. And in the 21-22 period, we had a savings target of £9.3 million, of which we had achieved by the end of year £8.2 million, £5.8 million of which was recurring. We've highlighted in the report our continuing approach to savings, and we'll be utilising the 8 best value themes that you'll see in page 190 of the combined pack. This approach has supported us in achieving so far this year 55% of our savings target by the end of month 6 of £3.3 million. And we will continue to use this approach as we move into planning for next year, which, as we've already heard, provides all of us a much more challenging context as the financial situation deteriorates. I'll pause there, and I'm happy to take any further questions that you have on this annual report.
Thank you, Fiona. I wonder if we should actually now take the Highland Health and Social Care Partnership report from Louise, and then invite comments and questions on both.
Many thanks, Boyd. And it's fair to say that our report is, I think, in my view, is an improvement from last year's report, where we were still challenged with how we articulated our position. However, I would say that there is still further work to do about how we really embed all of the improvements and developments and challenges that are going across the services. So we have some really positive pockets in there, but I think we've got more work to do to get to the point where Argyll and Bute says that it comprehensively covers everything we do. And I think certainly the conversations Lorraine and I have had is very much about how we use the annual delivery plan to really shape where we go with this report in the future, because I think there's lots of good examples, but there's certainly more that we could have put in there that I don't think we've fully captured yet. So I just wanted to give a little bit of a health warning that we are progressing with our reporting here, but we're not quite a finished article. So I think I'm more than happy to take any challenge on that in terms of what isn't in the report. But certainly I think what we've managed to do there is very much highlight some of the successes, some of the challenges and some of the opportunities. And in line with what Fiona was mentioning around some of the developments, primary care has been a particular focus of the report. So talking about pharmacy, talking about mental health and the developments in that area. And certainly that's a really positive step forward about how people who are involved in, who are contacted by all of our services, everybody has some contact with primary care at some point. So the fact that we are really developing and shaping those services for the future is a real bonus. In addition to that, we have areas such as perinatal mental health, which has developed over the period of time and has continued that development into this year. And certainly I think when we report on next year, we'll be able to give a much clearer picture about our direction of travel, both for children's services and for mental health, which are really key areas of development for us. And you'll notice that we've identified the aspects of children and families and the outcomes in relation to that as a joint part of the report with Highland Council. And certainly I think one of our developments moving forward is how we make that seamless pathway from Highland Council services to NHS services and more broadly within our partnership and partners. In relation to some of the challenges, you'll see there, for example, that there's been a huge demand for adult protection, and you know that is a concern in some ways, but equally we are identifying and taking forward those challenges so that we ensure that we have the safest possible services for people. So that's one of the areas of challenge, but you will see others within the report. And certainly in terms of areas for development, I think we're looking at how we move forward with SDS, with drug and alcohol, as we've already referred to earlier, our CAMP services, and in relation to carers. So some of the outcome measures that you'll see further down, we have shown improvement on, which has been really positive despite some of the challenges already mentioned. We are also showing higher than the national average in a number of areas. However, not to be complacent, there are areas for improvement, and certainly some of the ones that I wanted to mention are how carers are feeling. It's been an enormously difficult 2-3 years, and we need to do as much as we can to support carers who are the backbone of healthcare and health and social care. Really, they're providing things day in, day out, and we need to be there for them. So that's one of the measures that was most concerning to me, that people weren't feeling adequately supported. And probably in line with that, there's some measures around people's voice and how we coordinate and how people experience care. So we've got to get that right at that most basic of levels. There's also some work to do in terms of readmission rates, because that is one that impacts across all of our services. So there's certainly areas of development, but I don't want to negate anything that the staff are doing, because I think one of the things that comes out in this report and in Fiona's report is there is so much going on, there is so much development, so much enthusiasm and motivation from people. So it really, part of the key aspect of this report is to thank all of those staff that have contributed to all elements of these outcomes and all elements of the development that we've provided over the last 12 months. Thank you.
Thank you, Louise. Can I invite questions for both Louise and Fiona? Pam?
Yeah, I'll start while other people are thinking. I think both really comprehensive reports, and I think, as Louise already noted, slightly different in presentation and style. And I suppose it's great to see that progression in Highland, and I think it is a good time then to review that and say, so how do you make that, how do you take that forward? I guess these reports are, whilst really important for us to see, they are supposed to demonstrate our accountability to the public. So in terms of easy read and in terms of being accessible for people, I'm just interested in what we're doing around that. Questions to both of you.
I've unmuted first, so I'll go for it, Fiona. Yes, absolutely. And one of the things and the developments for next year's report is to try and make it much more visual and make it much bolder with the information, because it is quite highly narrative as it stands. So I think that will be the future development of our report going forward. But in terms of this year, I think we need to, certainly my ambition is to get us to a point where we can actually have almost the plan on a page, giving some highlights, giving some messages that come from the report, so that people aren't having to trawl through absolutely all of this.
Thank you. Sorry, I couldn't get off mute then. Yes, Pam, I suppose my response would also be similar, that we've been working in the HSCP on all of our duties in terms of accessibility and equalities. And so our strategic plan, if you recall, that came through board, was also represented with a plan on a page. And what we've agreed to do with our annual review of that is to do a review on a page as well, to try and make that simplified version there. You'll see in our next item, when I go on to talk about the Child Poverty Action Plan, that we've put a child-friendly version that we co-produced with young people together on that. And we also produce a number of our documents in easy read format. So I can't answer without Stephen here. Curses, I knew I'd miss him. What we've done about this particular report and being available in more accessible versions, but I'm happy to check that out and come back to you again. But the wider application of duties in relation to accessibility, we're quite well progressed in.
Thank you both. Sarah?
Thanks. Yeah, it was just to add to what Fiona had said there. I know that we can always do a bit better, but I know that one of the ways we've been trying to improve and getting us to where we are is we've got some really great representatives on our strategic planning group, public reps, carer reps, and they've been invaluable, I think, in helping us get to that point where they help us sense check, because even when we think we've simplified it, there's always jargon and acronyms in there. So they've been really, really helpful. And I think also we've seen that in the IJB as well. So we strengthened our membership in the IJB this year with carer reps and public reps and third sector reps, and they've been hugely helpful, and I think really helped kind of hold a mirror up for us to catch the things that we've been missing. But absolutely, I think there's always more that we can do to make them more accessible. So yeah, welcome that.
Thanks, Sarah. Any further points, comments? I agree that we need to think about how we communicate the messages that are in these reports more widely and in a more accessible fashion. Maybe Ruth could advise us on that, Ruth Fry. There's a lot of good news within both these documents, which you have both highlighted, and it deserves to reach a wider public. So congratulations to the presenters and the writers of these reports. We're being asked at this juncture to note the performance reports and to accept substantial assurance. Are we happy to do so? In which case we move on to item 14, the Child Poverty Action Plan Review for 2021-22, and it's back to you, Fiona.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Board. I'm presenting this paper today on behalf of David Gibson, our Chief Social Work Officer. They've got me doing all the legwork today. And just an apology, on the paper it says this is presented for awareness, but I actually think it's being presented for decision. So apologies with that oversight on the paper. Anyway, in relation to background, the Child Poverty Scotland Act 2017 was enacted to address increasing concerns regarding child poverty across Scotland. The Act requires local authorities and health boards to prepare a child poverty action report annually. So the report you are considering today is the third report produced within Argyll and Bute since the action plan was produced in 2019. I chair the Child Poverty Action Group in Argyll, and this report reflects the work across our partners within that group. We take a strong children's rights approach. Our plan is also presented as a children and young people friendly version, which has been co-produced with young people, which you can find embedded in the covering paper. So how are we doing so far? Well, earlier this year, the End Child Poverty Coalition published data, and their analysis showed a 1.8% reduction in child poverty in Argyll and Bute as compared with 2014-15. This is great news, but we know that this year has presented significant new challenges in relation to child poverty. Food shortages, the cost of living crisis, and the war in Ukraine present a depressing and difficult backdrop where we're trying to work in the field of mitigating child poverty. The key areas of our plan are increasing income through employment and earnings, increasing income through benefits, which in the last year we have been able to demonstrate through our advice centres and benefit support that we've directed families to over £10 million of gain. The plan also focuses on cost of living initiatives and on family support. So for the sake of brevity, I'll take any questions that you have, but I'd ask for you to consider the plan, which has been supported already by the Integrated Joint Board in Argyll and Bute and Argyll and Bute Council, and I commend it for your approval.
Thank you, Fiona. And I must say I found this a fascinating read, and I've learned so much from it. And there's so much meat in it that I do share the aspiration to have a more user-friendly graphic version of it as well. I think that would be helpful for wider dissemination. Can I ask colleagues to
Chair, can I just respond to that? Because embedded within the paper is a SWAY, which is the child-friendly version, but you might also want to call it the more accessible version, which is a graphic and kind of bullet-pointed version of the plan. So that may be very useful for those that want that simplified or truncated version that's also quite visually attractive to see.
Thanks. Fiona, and there were so many instances of funds being accessed to help with in various ways, and it was really very heartening to read, although against a really difficult background, socioeconomic background. Pam.
Yeah, it was really just to acknowledge the SWAY easy version, which is super actually, and certainly worth adopting in other areas, and if that's been generated with the children, with the voice of the children and the sanction of the children, then I think that's absolutely brilliant. I think it's great to get that comprehensive picture of the state of play for children's services, and I know that we've got the action plan for Highland coming at a future date, so I think this is the kind of information we need to understand. You know, this early intervention, early years determines what hits adult services later in life, so it's a really important topic for us. So I welcome the report and find it really useful. But this way presentation is really good way of condensing it. Thanks.
Jerry.
Excuse me. Thank you, Boyd. It really just to give my thanks to Fiona for the report. I really enjoyed reading it. I thought it was full of really useful information, and I particularly enjoyed the pupils' view on poverty and the impact on that. And I think it was really good to see that in there. So really thank you for that report.
Thanks, Jerry. Susan.
There we go. Thank you. Yes, thank you for that. And obviously had the benefit of seeing this when it came through the IJB as well, and really commend you to have a look at that sway embedded link, which is really heartening. I mean, it was a point I raised when it came to our committee as well, but there's a little chart that shows a reduction in the number of children experiencing poverty over a period since 2014 up to 2021, and I challenged this at the time that we were underplaying the success here, because it shows the percentage point change as 1.9% in improvement. Actually, it's near a 10% improvement in terms of real numbers of people affected, and the authors didn't want to claim a bigger success than they felt was warranted, but I think they probably should. And you know how hard this work is to shift and how much effort has gone into it. They have shifted the dial more than some of their figures represent. I understand their caution, but I wanted to flag it up a little bit more.
Thanks, Susan. I don't think sometimes it's in our nature to trumpet our own successes, and I think we have to become more alert at doing that, alive to doing it. Any further questions or points for Fiona? This has already been discussed and accepted and approved by the IJB. It has also been endorsed by a Highland Board Council, so we're now being asked to approve and endorse it as a board. Are we content to do so? And in doing so, to congratulate Fiona, you and your team on the material within which you report within the report. It is really very, very encouraging, albeit that there is that enormous poverty challenge, which is only going to be exacerbated, I guess, in the coming months. Okay, thank you. We move on now to item 15, which is the Gaelic Language Plan version 3, and Nicola is not with us to introduce it, but Ruth will give some background to that.
Thank you, Boyd. Yeah, so before you, board members, is our third draft final Gaelic language plan for your approval today, and so that this can be submitted to Bord na Gaelic by the end of March next year. The report invites you to take moderate assurance on the work of the Gaelic plan, which has been undertaken in conjunction with executives, with heads of service and interested staff and officers at Bord na Gaelic, so that it's an appropriate and it's proportionate and achievable plan. You're invited to approve it, and there's been a public consultation exercise and a staff capacity audit already undertaken, so that's informed the wording of the final draft. There's also comment on the moderate assurance level that's proposed, and obviously this is going to require some buy-in by relevant staff and budgets, and the active engagement of the Gaelic implementation group for it to be fully directed throughout the organisation. So it's there for your approval for today, for it to ultimately be submitted to Bord na Gaelic by the end of the financial year. Thank you.
Thanks, Ruth. Any questions or comments? This will go Anne.
Yeah, thanks. So just a couple of comments. First of all, I was pleased to see the emphasis in the plan on actions related to recruitment, because I think that could be a very useful niche area of promotion that might help us with some of our recruitment issues. So that was good to see. And the other sort of comment in the plan that I was very interested in was in relation to the health and care outcomes associated with having information in a first language that's not English. And I just wondered, I think it's quite important. I mean, it was perhaps to be expected that we would get some feedback questioning some of the expenditure in the plan, but I would be very surprised if there isn't either some evidence out there or some evidence that can be gathered by us showing the health benefits of people being able to engage with services in their preferred language. So, and in that respect, it's a pity Brian's not here today, but I wondered if there might be any opportunity to discuss with UHI any kind of research in this area. It may be something that we could promote as a point of interest, particularly for our board. Thanks.
Thanks, Anne. That's an interesting suggestion, and one I think that's worthy of following up. There certainly has been work done around the benefits of using first language with the elderly and in the context of dementia as well. So yes, it would be useful to get academic involvement in that sphere. Any further questions or comments? As I understand it, this will now go to Gaelic, and they will come back to us in due course in the new year, and they will give their response before we finalize the report. So at this juncture, we're being asked to take assurance, audit assurance, the work of the plan, which has been undertaken in conjunction with executives, heads of service, interested staff and officers at Gaelic to ensure that it is appropriate, proportionate and achievable. We're also being asked to approve the final draft for submission to Gaelic, including, as it does now, information from the consultation and staff capacity audit. Are we content to progress on that basis? Thanks. Move now to committee memberships and chair position review, item 16, and Ruth will speak to this paper.
Thank you. So yes, this report details a full review and makes recommendations for changes to the committee memberships and chair positions. There's been discussions taking place with all non-executive board members who are concerned and for whom there's changes. And the recommended changes are intended to take effect from 1st January 2023, and they're set out in the report, in the appendices to the report. So there's just a few points I just wanted to raise, something that was raised earlier in the meeting. Given our financial and performance challenges facing the organisation, there's been a decision taken to increase non-executive members of the FRP committee. At the request of the incoming chair to the Clinical Governance Committee, we're consulting with all relevant individuals to consider changing the meeting dates for March and June. So final decisions on those potential changes will be communicated in due course. It's also a commitment of the integration scheme for Highland that board members will be involved in the main strategic committees of both the lead agencies. And we've approached Highland Council for board membership of the Council's Health, Social Care and Wellbeing Committee. As yet, we're still to hear a response from the Council, but once that has been received, we'll be able to confirm who will be on that particular committee from our board, and at that point this particular report would have a highest assurance grading associated with it. So you're invited to take moderate assurance from the report, agree to the increase in FRP committee membership, agree to the changes of committee memberships and the chair positions taking effect from 1st January, and agree in principle to the proposed Clinical Governance Committee date changes for March and June, subject to agreement of all of those involved. Thank you.
Thank you, Ruth. And Anne played a leading part in the conversations around these changes. Anne, do you want to make any comments?
I don't think so, Boyd. Just, well, obviously to thank everybody that's cooperated with various requests or suggestions made to them. And there's been one or two sort of changes of plan along the way, but I think we've got a good mix going forward, albeit there's still one or two small issues to resolve. For example, the chair of the Pharmacy Practices Committee. And I guess another issue which may be worth exploring today would be what we feel about appointing champions to some of the positions that are mentioned in the paper. It would be helpful perhaps if Ruth could clarify whether the positions that are vacant are ones that we as a board are required or encouraged to appoint to, or whether these are just a selection of champions that other boards have in place. So are they suggestions or requirements, I guess, is what I'm asking. Thank you.
Thanks, Anne. Ruth?
Yes, well, I'm not entirely sure, in fact, if that is a comprehensive list of all of the champions that we could be considered to appoint to. And yet again, I'm not terribly sure, in fact, whether it's a requirement of the board to appoint to these positions, or if it's like you've said, it's a desired approach that we're expected to take. I'll find out more information on that particular question, Anne, and I can get back to you and to other board members on that. It's a fairly vague situation, and as far as I can tell, across the boards, there's a different approach taken and different combination of champion positions that are taken across each board. There are, in fact, some positions mentioned in the blueprint, though, so that is something that is surely expected of us to at least fulfill the ones that are referred to in the blueprint.
Yeah, I think my understanding was that these are roles that some boards have. They have a different combination of these roles, but it would be good to get more clarity about that, Ruth. Tim, you wanted to come in.
Thank you, Chair. Just on a point of detail, but I think it's worth getting right though. On the Highland Council Health, Social Care and Wellbeing Committee, both me and the Director of Nursing are invited as members, and given that we are full board members of this board, I think that's worth noting. It isn't clearly not the same as having non-executive members, and also we're non-voting members of that committee. But I think it's just important to note for the record.
Thank you, Tim. That's helpful. Appendix 3 sets out changes which are required in the terms of reference of a FRP. Alex, did you have any comments about that?
No, I was happy with that, Boyd, and we were going to take it at the next FRP committee just to make sure everything goes through, especially with the increased numbers, etc. And some of our new members will have to be becoming aware of it. Hey, Jerry.
Okay. Any further questions, points? In that case, we're being asked to take moderate assurance from the report to agree to increase FRP committee membership as shown in Appendix 3 to agree to the changes proposed for committee memberships and chair positions taking effect from 1st January, and to agree the proposed clinical governance committee date changes in March and June to which Ruth referred. Are we happy to do that? Thanks. Thank you. Move on now to item 17, the governance and committee assurance reports. And first of them, FRP, Alex.
Yeah, Boyd, we spent a considerable amount of time discussing the financial position, as you would expect, and the minutes reflect quite a bit of that discussion and potential actions that were taken there. What we discussed was month 6. You've now seen month 7, which has actually got slightly worse than month 6 figures. So we're on that wrong trend. But that was the main part of the discussion. We talked about the winter ready plan, etc. But as I say, the minutes are there for members to read. Thanks.
Thanks, Alex. Any questions for Alex? If not, we move on to the Highland Health and Social Care Committee meeting of 3rd November. Anne?
Sorry, problems with my cursor there. Well, again, I don't think I've got anything to add. I think it's clear from the minutes that a number of the items on the agenda were similar to what we've been discussing today. So all of the main issues that arose at the committee we've already been discussing on our own agenda for this board meeting. So I don't have anything else to add. Thanks.
Thank you, Anne. Any questions for Anne? If not, move on to clinical governance and Gaynor.
Thank you, Chair. I think reflecting on the committee, the conversations that we're having now and the assurance that we're able to take is much better. So I'm really pleased with how the committee has evolved over the last few years. Things to raise to yourselves as the board. Boyd has already mentioned the strategic risk register, and we looked at the ones that are sit within the remit of clinical governance committee at the last meeting. Just really to flag up that the committee is aware, as the board aware from the discussions that we've had today, that there are ongoing system pressures, and for clinicians, we do understand that, we do hear that. I think also the clinical governance quality and performance data that we're seeing at Clinical Governance Committee has been evolving again over the last few years, and we're getting really positive feedback on that dashboard. And again, how that's allowing us to triangulate information and take greater assurance for committee members. And apologies. And we're then able to give greater assurance to the board. So thank you.
Thanks, Gaynor. Are there any questions for Gaynor? No, we move on to the Area Clinical Forum meeting of 3rd November and Katrina.
Thank you. The minutes of the meeting do speak for themselves in the main, but I would draw to the board's attention the appendix, which was a SBAR that was raised from the APC. It was brought to the APC through the Director of Pharmacy with regards to pharmacy closures within the Health Board. And the ACF agreed to highlight this to the board to ask for recognition that there is a challenge with regards to that, but that the community pharmacy services team are offering moderate assurance with regards to the fact that they have the issues under control with the amendments and the discussions they've had with the community pharmacy teams involved. in order to make sure that there are consistent pharmacy services within the areas that have been affected, in particular in Inverness. It links into the workforce challenges that are happening everywhere. So it's I suppose a reminder that these challenges can present themselves in a manner of manifestations, if you like. So I'm happy to take any questions with regards to that, though.
Any questions for Katrina, Boyd?
I think just for clarity and support what Katrina said, but for clarity for those new to topic, community pharmacies are independently run, they're independent contractors, but this in a sense highlights the significance of workforce challenge even in independent sector, which works alongside NHS in the overall delivery of care. In this case, all of the features that you associate with a community pharmacy. So just important for folk to realise. So therefore, it's noted and escalated, and people in the board will do what they can to help. But the problem affects patients, it affects the community, and it affects other services to some extent that we have more direct control of. But the issue sits in the independent sector, and that makes it that bit harder to be able actually to rectify it.
Thanks, Boyd. Joanne? Joanne? You're trying to come off mute? No, okay. Just also to say, Katrina, that you and I and Boyd and Pam had a meeting recently to discuss how we might collaborate more closely with the ACF, between the ACF and the board, and how the flow of information and engagement could be improved between the board and the committee, the ACF for. So that's something that Pam is going to be taking forward. Moving on now to staff governance and Sarah.
Thanks, Boyd. So it was a fairly packed agenda, to say the least, at our last staff governance meeting, and you'll see reflected in the minutes there was a lot of discussion on what I would call the hot topics, which I suppose is reflective of the breadth of work that's happening at the moment in relation to supporting our workforce. Just to bring out, we obviously had a deep dive into the risk registers, which was really helpful, and obviously we've heard about that in today's agenda, and also a look at the evolution, if you like, around the People and Culture Programme Board, which is obviously incredibly important. We did talk about whistleblowing, as we do at every staff governance meeting, but we agreed that we didn't have enough time to explore it fully, and agreed to dedicate some additional time at our next staff governance meeting to look at that in the round, and also to hear more from Bert about the detail of his visits that he's been doing. I think that was all I wanted to bring to the board's attention, but I can take any questions, or I can move straight on, whichever you prefer.
Any questions on staff governance for Sarah? Don't see any. Sarah, on to IJB.
Thank you, Boyd. So I actually wasn't going to talk about the minutes in the pack. We're always, just because of the timings, we're always a little bit out of kilter with the IJB and the board. So I thought I'd give a very brief verbal update on the most recent IJB, which was just last week, just so that the board are sort of up to date with what's happening. two things in particular. Our last AGB, which was on the 23rd of November, which I wanted to pull out, was we had our strategic workforce plan came to the IGB, which obviously is of critical importance given the challenges around available workforce, and that was great. Going back to conversation we've had earlier today in terms of accessible documents, that's really come along in terms of how easy it is to understand, and in particular it drew out some challenges which will be true for all of NHS Highland around challenges in terms of staffing our island communities and services, accommodation issues for staff and potential staff, and the cost of living crisis on our workforce and potential workforce. So those came through in the workforce plan that we saw. And the only other thing I wanted to bring to your attention was we had our annual report from our Chief Social Work Officer, which, similar to what we've talked about today in terms of the child poverty plan, was a really good report kind of articulating the societal pressures and challenges that we're seeing, and I suppose how those have been either masked or exasperated as a result of the pandemic and the actions taken around the pandemic. So if anybody's looking for some reading around that, I would urge you to go onto our site and download those papers, because the Chief Social Work Officer report is a really good read in terms of understanding the pressures and needs of the most vulnerable people in our society. So would recommend that all board members have a look at that if you get a chance. But I think that was it. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Any questions for Sarah? If not, we come to Pharmacy Practices Committee, the meeting of 31st of August. Gaynor.
Thank you, Boyd. This is just a formal paper outlining, I think, what I brought to the board at the last meeting under AOB, and updated you verbally so that the Pharmacy Practice Committee met and approved the pharmacy to go ahead in Speenbridge. Thanks.
Thank you, Gaynor. We're being asked as a board to confirm that we've received adequate assurance from the governance committees and to note these minutes and agreed actions from the Area Clinical Forum and from the IJB. Are we content to do so? Thank you. AOCB, is there any other competent business? I have one item that I would want to raise, and that's just to note for the record that the board has been de-escalated from level 3 to level 2 for culture, leadership and governance, and that we welcome that move very much indeed. We will still have to look at finance, as do all boards, and mental health as well, but to have reduced twice in the past year from level 4 down to level 2 is no mean achievement in these difficult times. Jean, you wanted to come in?
Yes, just quickly, I just wondered, are there plans afoot to reintroduce the spotlight sessions again at some point? Because I found them really helpful and enlightening for context, etc.
Yeah, that was the staff recognition items. I think you're referring to. I think we have to think about where they best sit. I think we had considered maybe moving them into a board development session rather than into the full board sessions. Certainly wouldn't want to lose sight of them, Jean. They were very valuable. They were linked to the pandemic, but nevertheless, there are lots of good activities going on throughout our board area from Helensburgh to Wick, and we need to do more to recognise and celebrate the achievements of our staff, and in doing so, of course, we should place on record our pleasure at the award to Andy Kent of the Global Citizen Award, and also recognition of the two others who were nominated for awards at the Scottish Health Awards, Aracha Practice and Rory Monroe, and we want to place that on record as well. I'll be writing to all of these to congratulate them individually. Ruth, you want to take them?
Thank you, Boyd. Yes, I was just wanting to update members on something that Joanne was trying to say to you. She's sent me a message just to confirm that she was in fact in attendance at the ACF meeting on the 3rd of November, but her name isn't notified in the minutes, so we'll get that rectified for you.
Okay, thanks, Joanne. Thanks, Ruth. And the next meeting of the board is on the 31st of January. Pam, were you wanting to come at one point?
No, you said what I was going to say, that was fine.
Okay. Just to remind you too that there's an extra meeting on the 18th, I think it is. Yes, Wednesday, the 18th of January, when John Brown, the chair of Greater Glasgow Health Board, will present the new blueprint for good governance. And that will be the start off the process of the Pathfinder self-evaluation process. So we're not due to meet now till 15th, I think it is, of December, when we have a non-exec session, and we also have a session about Thuras Learn. Ruth, can you just say a little bit about that session with Thuras Learn?
Thank you. Yes, we have colleagues from our learning and development teams who are going to be coming to talk you through how to access your own training on Thuras and to enable you to access the learning on the board development site on the national site as well. So hopefully there'll be an interactive session. It will be an opportunity for you to see what opportunities there are to do some training, some personal training for yourself. It'll be an opportunity for you to see how the system works and for you to use it for yourselves in future.
Okay, are there any other items to be drawn to our attention? If not, I can close the meeting and allow Alex to go out to the golf course. And anybody else to indulge in that paper.
This morning, boy, it was frost. We can't get on. It's terrible. It's bloody good weather. We've got to stop it, you know. Rain's okay, but sunshine and frost, not good.
Might have to diversify your activities. Okay, thank you all for your attendance and contributions, and we'll see you together next month.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.